This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so I just hope that when you were encouraged to come to this class, no one told you to go to hell. Okay, I'm just hoping, right? No, the class is about hell. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so well, well. Okay, so one of Rambam's one of Rambam's 13 principles of faith, right? Others disagree about how many ikarim, how many actual foundational principles there are. And it's a question of how to categorize them. There's actually a sefer called Sefer HaIkarim, which is the sefer about the ikarim, about these basic fundamentals that I have the pleasure of having my chavrusa David here, that we're learning that together now. But Rambam most famously has his 13 principles of faith. And one of those is that there is this gemul, that there is repercussions of one's actions in this world, right? And the Sefer Ikarim, he only has three fundamentals, and that is one of the three. So certainly we believe that our actions here have repercussions in this world and have repercussions in the world to come. And I mentioned before how annoying it was as I was driving, listening to some radio talk show, I forgot what it was, and hearing someone call, I don't know if he called in or if he was one of the interviewees on this program, and he said, well, I'm Jewish, so of course we don't believe in heaven and hell. And it's like, I don't know where this guy landed from, right? And if he wants to represent his own ideas, everyone's entitled to do that, at least in this country. But to represent his ideas as being the Jewish ideas, so that was annoying to hear. I like to begin with a story, a bit of a joke, I guess, but that I saw a while ago. Person says, I was walking across a bridge one day. I saw a man standing on the edge, about to jump off. I ran over and said, stop, don't do it. Why shouldn't I? He said. I said, well, there's so much to live for. Like what? Well, are you religious or atheist? Religious. Me too. Are you Christian or Jewish? Christian. Me too. Are you Catholic or Protestant? Protestant. Me too. Are you Episcopalian or Baptist? Baptist. Me too. Wow. Are you Baptist Church of God or Baptist Church of the Lord? Baptist Church of God. Me too. Are you Reformed Baptist Church of God, Reformation 1879, or Reformed Baptist Church of God, Reformation 1915? He said, oh, Reformed Baptist Church of God, Reformation 1915. To which I said, die, heretic, and pushed him off. Okay. Now, we have many of these interfaith groups in the world, but most major religions of the world have a serious problem with each other. And that problem is called hell. Right? It's not often discussed at these meetings on religious tolerance, but the official Catholic policy is that Protestants, Muslims, and Jews go to hell. Protestants say that Catholics, Muslims, and Jews go to hell. And Muslims say that Christians and Jews go to hell. But from a Jewish point of view, it is very, very different. And first of all, there doesn't exist this concept of eternal, everlasting damnation and torture, right? That doesn't exist. There is no point in that. And a point that I like to make often, if we are believing in God, then God is the God of this universe. God is the God of all that is contained in this universe. Certainly, God is the God of all human beings on this planet who are clearly in a different level in terms of decision making, in terms of pondering the purpose of life than any other creatures on this planet. So God is the God of all humanity. And it seems to be, to me, let me say, it seems to be ridiculous to think that if a person is born into their religion and they follow their religion in a wholesome spiritual manner, and we're not talking about a deviant religion, right, which deals with, causing pain or things like that to others, that person might never have been exposed to other religions, to say that person, unless everyone is exactly this religion, then they have eternal damnation. To me, that seems to be preposterous and very, very illogical. But rather, if God is the God of all humanity, so then all humanity has the ability to connect to God. And not everyone is expected to be just one religion as opposed to another religion. And that is why, as Jews, we don't look to proselytize. We don't look to get people to convert to Judaism. And when someone comes to me looking to convert, one of the first things I say to them is, you can have a beautiful relationship with God. You can have a wonderful afterlife without having to convert to Judaism. If you choose to, so then it is a very intense relationship with a lot of requirements and demands, which lend to the intensity of a very beautiful relationship. But it's not necessary. So the whole idea that anyone who's not exactly like me is doomed to eternal damnation, to me, again, is preposterous, and it is illogical. So let us get started over here. Let's look at source number 1. Let me get it up over here so I can scroll along. Aryeh Kaplan, If You Were God. Aryeh Kaplan was a very, very prolific writer, thinker, passed away at a very young age. Right? I don't know, 48 was it, Dove? Yeah, could be. I don't know exactly. Dove says 48. And he has many books we have in our library, many books about, that do a tremendous, beautiful job of unpacking Jewish concepts and Jewish commandments, Jewish mitzvot, in a way that is very easily understood, belying the depth of that which he is conveying. And he has a whole essay or book, If You Were God, right? And goes through, right, how people say, well, why would God do this? Why would God do that? And he goes through, well, if you were God, it would be very similar. He says as follows when it comes to this idea about the afterlife. Imagine standing completely visible before God with your memory wide open, completely transparent, without any jamming mechanism or reducing valve to diminish its force. You'll remember everything you did and see it in a new light. You will see it in the light of the unshaded spirit, or if you will, in God's own light that shines from one end of creation to the other. The memory of every good deed and mitzvah will be the sublimest of pleasures, as our tradition speaks of Olam Haba. But your memory will also be open to all the things of which you are ashamed. They cannot be rationalized away or dismissed or forgotten. You will be facing yourself, fully aware of the consequences of all your deeds. We all know the terrible shame and humiliation experienced when one is caught in the act of doing something wrong. Imagine being caught by one's own memory with no place to escape. So, right away, we see the idea of the Jewish afterlife and the heaven and the hell is a confronting of oneself and having that full, complete awareness of the good that one has done and the not so good that one has done. And without the rationalizations, without the excuses, without, but just the full truth right before us. And that is, as he writes, we know the terrible shame and humiliation when one is caught in the act of doing something wrong. Right? Famously, the Gemara tells a story that the disciples came to, I believe it was a Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, on his deathbed, and said, Rebbe, give us a blessing. And he said, you should fear God as much as you fear people. And they said, Rebbe, what do you mean? You should fear God more than you fear people. And he said, Halavai. Halavai, we should fear God as much as we fear people. And he said, Teda, and I'll prove it to you. Know that this is true. Have you ever done something, but first looked over your shoulder to make sure no one could see you? Right? Who hasn't done something but done in a way that making sure no one will see us? But so if we're doing that, then it means we're fearing people more than we're fearing God. God is seeing us, and we're worried that no one else should see us. And this point is standing, as he says, completely visible before God. So God's justice is not served by punishing someone forever. Justice means that the repercussion fits that which you did wrong. So we are finite. Our sins, our misdoings are finite. And therefore that atonement must be finite. A mitzvah, right? My 30-second elevator pitch explanation of what is a mitzvah, right? You're in an elevator, someone says, oh, you're a religious Jew. I heard about these mitzvot. What is a mitzvah? So a mitzvah is a physical act done by a physical person in the physical world that allows us to come in contact with the godly, with the eternal. And therefore, a mitzvah is connecting to the infinite, and therefore it is infinite and eternal. The very connection with wrongdoing is connecting to that which is temporary, physical, fleeting, devoid of godliness. And therefore, evil and bad do not exist forever. Therefore, the atonement period is going to be a fixed period of time. But the reward period is going to be eternal, because the good that we do is something that brings us in contact with the eternal. So we're not talking about, devils and pitchforks and fire. We're talking about coming to terms with who we are. Because we are nothing but the sum total of all the things that we do, all the decisions that we make. Whether they are actions, words, thoughts, that's who, in our essence, we are. The Ramchal, Rav Moshe Chaim Lutzato, in his Derech Hashem, writes as follows. We'll go right to the English. In his kindness, God, this is number 2, God maximizes mankind's chances of successfully attaining the ultimate goal. He therefore decreed that there should be a secondary way to attach oneself to God for those for whom such attachment is fitting. Namely, those who were overcome by evil, but not to such an extent that they should lose existence entirely. Okay, interesting. There are some people who will lose existence entirely. Right? A Hitler, Yamach Shemo, is someone who will lose existence entirely. But there are those who are not anywhere near that. These people therefore experience the punishment of Gehenna, the purpose of which Gehenna is the Hebrew word that we use for hell, the purpose of which is to recompense the person according to the transgression, in a way that he will be left with no debt to pay for his misdeeds. He will then be able to achieve the ultimate reward in accordance with the good acts that were performed. By virtue of this system, the actual number of those who are lost is completely minimized. Such a severe consequence only applies to those who have been so completely taken over by evil that it will be impossible for them to experience the true reward and eternal delight. And this is a very, very important concept to keep in mind. There really is no such thing as punishment. What there is rehabilitation. There is a cleansing. There is a coming to terms and a deep and profound regret over the things that were done wrongly. Even when we talk about makot, Beit Din administering, the Jewish court administering lashes for certain, which of course we don't have nowadays. But even that is not punitive. That is in order to cleanse the person. Even a capital punishment administered by a death penalty, even capital punishment administered by a Beit Din, that is not punitive. The person makes kiddush. The person says vidoy, confession before that. The person says kiddush before that. The person is, just like we've learned the idea of a sacrifice, that's a proxy for the person, and it's meant to bring about a profound teshuva, a profound realization of the wrong that was done and a correcting of one's ways. There are certain things that a proxy cannot be used, and therefore the person needs to leave this world and then be able to enter the world to come. So, and the Gehenna that we speak about is a rehabilitative, it is a cleansing process. And that is why when a person is saying Kaddish, we say Kaddish for 11 months. That's the custom, to say Kaddish for 11 months, not for a full 12 months, because the longest sentence a person will have is 12 months. And we don't want to broadcast our assessment that this person needs the Kaddish for all 12 months. Never we say it for 11 months. Full disclosure, the world to come is a realm that is beyond the realm of time. So how we have these teachings and how we understand these teachings, which do apply time to it, I don't. It's not something. It's not something that I can really wrap my head around. Yes, Leah.
Since I'm here and I don't understand the full extent of this, my question is, you said that the person needs to feel like complete sorrow and regret. Does this person need to make it up to the people that he caused them sorrow here?
Okay.
If so,
Okay.
do it, because it's not only
Okay.
here.
Okay. So yeah, you're touching on a very an important point, and a very and yeah. One of the things that always annoys me is after there is some sort of horrific, mass shooting or this or that. You have all these people who come there. We with the play cards. We forgive you. We forgive you. Right now, it's very easy to forgive if you haven't been harmed. If you have been harmed, then if you have not been harmed, right, easy to forgive. But how do you, who were not harmed, forgive on behalf of those, right, who were harmed? And to take this a step further, Rambam is from the Gemara. It's very clear that even God can't forgive. If I've harmed someone, I need to make amends to that person. And on Yom Kippur, on the Day of Atonement, I can't become fully cleansed if I've harmed someone and I have not made amends to the person that I've harmed. And that's why, certainly before Yom Kippur, whenever, if we've harmed someone, we should ask their forgiveness in a sincere manner. But certainly before Yom Kippur, and there is many beautiful tefillah. One is called Tefillat Zaka, the prayer of purification that's in our Machzor, in our Yom Kippur prayer book. And it's a very long prayer it's printed there before even Kol Nidre. And there we ask Hashem to put into the heart of any of those we might have wronged to please forgive us. And we forgive those who we have harmed. That we should not be the cause of anyone having an unsuccessful or unfulfilling Yom Kippur because I'm still holding on to that angst or that anger that I might have been feeling. But yes, and exactly how that works for each person. One way that it can work, which we certainly don't want to resort to, is part 3 of this series, which is reincarnation. That a person might need to return and right the ship and make the necessary amends.
So there is no punishment for people who committed severe criminal acts. There is no punishment for them.
I'm not saying there's no punishment. I'm saying the point is not punitive.
What is punitive?
It's not there to, I'm not punishing for the sake of punishing. The punishment is in order to cleanse that person, for them to come to that realization, to be purified.
It's not for revenge, it's for correction.
Correct.
The people beyond, which never felt any guilt, how do you correct them?
So there are those that are beyond, but those I think are few and far between.
There are a lot of them.
Yeah.
I've been very blessed in my life. I've only met wonderful people. I've only met wonderful people. Yeah. Yeah.
How do they feel guilty? No, they don't feel guilty.
So, an expression that we often hear, right, especially when it comes to people who perpetrated horrific acts against others, right? That they should not, I don't care how old they are, they must be brought to justice. They should not go peacefully to the grave, okay? And the way I feel about that is, granted, true, I agree. We should do our very best to bring them to justice. However, they're not going to go, they might go peacefully to the grave, but once they get to the grave, it's not going to be all that peaceful. In other words, this overriding sense of how can they go peacefully to the grave is, we could rephrase that as, how can they get away with it? Now, if this life is all that there is, and they went peacefully to the grave, they got away with it. But for a believing person that we are spiritual beings that will exist afterwards, so they haven't gotten away with it. On the contrary, it might be worse for them to have not paid some of the repercussions in this world, and it all awaits them in the world to come. Yes.
I forgot what sage it was that he said what I hope when he comes to the world to come is to be judged. So it's important to be judged because when you go through that judgment process, then you get to go to Gehenna. But if you're not judged by
Right.
Hashem,
Then and you're
just
you're
in the ether.
in a limbo
Yes,
state.
you're in the limbo
Yeah.
state. And
Yeah. There is such a concept.
and that's where
Right.
I'm just hoping
Right.
that
So this Gehenna is, as Rabbi as he had, as Rabbi Ari Kaplan had said, it is standing before God, right, fully aware of the good and the not so good that we have done. And that is a very, very profound sense of shame and embarrassment. Yes, Janet.
So what does ceasing to exist entirely, as Ramchal says, look like? Is that your neshama just it compresses in like to a black hole or something, or does it? Because since we all are originally an extension of Hashem, that's
Yeah,
neshama.
unless
Or does Hashem just take it back and reincorporate it? And
I couldn't. I'm not qualified to answer what that looks like.
Janet,
I
took
can.
a Tanya class last Monday, and I asked this question of Esther Leah, and she said a portion of the neshama is kept by Hashem, but the portion that needs work is sent back in reincarnation.
oh,
That's
interesting.
how she explained it.
Right, but that's not what Ramchal is saying.
Yeah.
Right. That is for some. That is for some.
That's the way
But
she explained
but what
it.
Ramchal is saying is that there are certain people who finito.
That's it.
Like
Yeah.
maybe those
Yeah.
were the ones who should have had carried here and didn't for some reason. And also then on the other end, what if you're really trying and want someone to, have a way to move toward God, but you're still angry about something like a rape of your child or
Look, Hashem certainly takes everything into account as a loving, benevolent being.
But then you realize you're still angry, and so no, I'm not forgiving you yet.
I think there are different levels of that too, though. I think
Yeah.
that if you've been hurt and you want a boundary, you have the right to have that boundary.
Correct.
I think that if you are dealing with things that are generational, you have the right to have a boundary. I think that it has to do, there isn't one way of looking at it. I think that it has to do with a lot of nuanced subtleties that are specific to different families. I think Jews in general have more generational things to deal with because we've always moved around to get away from. So I think it's not as simple as, well, he was mean to her, so now he's going to be 11 months.
Correct.
For child abuse,
it's very,
or
very,
stalkers.
it's very nuanced.
Very nuanced.
There's an incredible book by a Dr. Ager. I forget her first name now. Edith Ager, right? And the name of the book?
Do you remember? The Choice is her first book.
I think The Choice.
That's her, yeah.
Yeah, which is incredible. And she was a Holocaust survivor. She had, she was in the camps in Auschwitz with Dr. Mengele Yamach Shemo, and she ended up being this speaker who would go for the U.S. Army, for the armed forces, speaking about dealing with things and to very, very encapsulate at least what I took as the main thing of it. If you're going to be angry, then you're carrying that with you. The person that you're angry at is not suffering, is not feeling your anger. That is something that you are carrying. So one needs to work at letting go of that anger. Now, boundaries need to exist. Meaning, if someone has been harmful to me, then I will need to create boundaries to make sure that that person will not and cannot harm me further. But anger is that is an environment that I'm looking to create around me to protect myself going forward. But if one can let go of the anger, so then that person is that much healthier. Otherwise, we're the ones who are carrying. One of my Rabbeim, I love a Rav Mandelkorn, would tell very beautifully of a guy who was driving to work and caught in traffic, right? And there was someone in the other lane trying to get out of that lane, which was terrible. And he comes to a full stop and graciously waves the guy in, and the guy waves him a nice thank you, and they're both traveling on. A few miles down the road, it's the opposite situation. And now he's stuck in a lane, and he's trying to get in, and no one's letting him in. And then he sees, there, that car, that's the car that I let in before. And he waves to that guy, and the guy waves another part of his finger at this guy and keeps on going. He also waved, right? And this guy is burning. He gets to work and he starts snapping at the other co-workers, and his boss calls him in and he snaps at the boss, and his wife calls and he snaps at his wife, and his kids call and he snaps at his kids, and he goes out for lunch and he snaps at the person serving lunch, and his whole day is just ruined. He's going crazy. And finally the day's over, and he's still, his heart's pumping, and he gets into the elevator and he goes down. He's on the 6th floor. The elevator stops at the 2nd floor. And that guy walks in. And he looks at him and he says, you, because of you, my wife's not making supper for me tonight. Because of you, my boss put me on this probation. Because of you, my secretary walked out on me today. Because of you. And the guy says, excuse me, do I know you? Have we ever met? Right? He doesn't know that you exist. And you, right? That's the anger. That a person carries that anger, that's us. It's just corrosive, eating away at us. The Gemara actually says that anger is tantamount to idolatry. How is anger like idolatry? And this is the key to how a person can try to get beyond anger. An understanding of why is anger like idolatry is because I'm angry because of the way things worked out. Meaning, if I were running the show, if I was running the world, I would do it much better than the way God is doing it. And that's why anger is tantamount to idolatry. Right? And a way to try to relieve and release some of this anger is to say that God is running the world. I don't understand why I had to be put through this, but if I was not meant to be put through this, then that person would not have put me through this. Now, that person will have to answer to God why they chose to use their free will to put this person through the hell that they put him through. But, as one of my Rabbi once said, my free will stops at your nose. Meaning, I have free will, but I can't cause anything to you that was not meant to be caused. So therefore, don't shoot the messenger, right? Recognize that for whatever reason, and some people have gone through horrific things in life, and maybe it's Gilgal, who knows what it involves. But that is one of the keys towards trying to release some of that anger that a person's feeling. Stephen first, and then David.
Is there any positive role for anger? Like, Shlomo said there's a time for this and a time for that. Are there situations where anger is the correct response? And is there some way you're supposed to channel that to something positive?
So it seems that there is no time that real anger is the correct response. There are times that I might have to appear to be angry, right? Parents, right? At times, right, we'll have to, I've told the story many times when I was running a boys' sleepaway camp in Israel. And we took over a high school, we had a dorm, and the first night, right, these little kids, I'm talking about kids that were like 8 years old, 9 years old, little cute little kids. They stuffed the shower drain and they flooded the whole place.
Seems like a
So,
good idea at the time, right?
yeah, seemed like a good idea, right? Never overestimate the mind of a 9-year-old boy, right?
What'll happen,
Yeah.
what'll
So-
happen if?
yeah. So I called them in there and I'm giving it to them. I'm saying, do you guys want to be here in camp? This is the first night. I can send you home tomorrow. This is not how it works here in camp. And they were the cutest little faces, like looking up at me. And it was impossible. And I said, "There's 1 second." I went to the next room. I burst out laughing hysterically, got myself together, came back in and said, and I'm telling you right now, right? I needed to act angry, right? But to be angry, the Gemara also compares anger to drunkenness, right? In drunkenness, you think you're making good decisions. You think you are imparting pearls of great wisdom and introspection, but actually you're sounding like an idiot, right? You're not making good decisions. And anger gets us working up in a similar way that we're not thinking clearly. There are three places where Moshe got angry and he forgot halachot as a result of that, right? And according to some, in this week's parsha, according to the way Rambam learns, the issue of hitting instead of speaking to the rock, the real issue why he was not able to go into the land of Israel was because of anger, because of his anger. So I don't think there's any time where a person should be angry. Angry. There are times when a person should appear to be angry, right? To make the impression that this is something very, very serious. But ideally, we always want to be in full control of ourselves and the decisions that we're making. And anger runs us at a warp speed that doesn't allow for
So since
that.
we can't control what we actually feel, probably the best strategy then is just to figure out always how to channel it somewhere.
Yeah. Or ideally, right, to have that equanimity, right, to not have that. I think Dave was first.
Colin.
Sorry?
This addresses your question. So, different psychologists write about different ways of handling anger. And I want to mention Dr. Egger first. In terms of letting go of anger, she has a particular process that she describes and perhaps prescribes, which she describes in her other book, The Gift, which is more of a, sort of a self-help book of her psychological, she did a PhD in psychology. So there's a process, and it's for letting go that she describes there. I'll leave it at that without going into it. Rabbi Twersky addresses your question in saying that anger is a reaction. Now, what he's calling anger is not, I think, what we're talking about in terms of anger. He calls that fury. So he says something will happen and it'll trigger you and you'll feel flooded, essentially, which is what we call it today. He'll say you can't help that and don't make yourself guilty over it because it's a reaction and you can't help it. But if you go into it and you give it energy and you make that you, let it take you over, that's fury.
You let it stew.
That's the, yes, exactly. That's, you have to catch it. That's your challenge.
Yeah.
And fury is wrong. That's the thing that I think we're talking about.
Grace, you want to say anything for?
Well, I was just saying, if somebody tries to hurt you, and necessarily, don't you get angry?
Again, yes, you do. Ideally, you don't get angry. Ideally, you protect yourself. You might need to act anger to make sure that get a person to stay away. But ideally, you want to be in full control of your actions and your responses. Whenever there's hypnotists.
So don't shoot when you're doing it.
Correct. Whenever in camp, there's been hypnotists, things like that, and I'm not a good subject. I'm not willing to just let myself go.
Too analytical.
No, I feel I need to be in control of myself. I don't want to hand the reins over to anyone else. Leah, and then.
We're talking this whole time about anger on a personal level. What about anger on a national level, on the group level? Like, for example, in Israel, so many families are so angry because the hostages are still there. What do you tell them? You know, it's totally justified. So how do they? I mean,
Look,
is their anger not right? I mean,
we always,
and they act on it.
if someone has gone through something horrific, it's not for me to tell them. This is the thing. Someone who went through the Holocaust, right? Hands off. Right? And families who have suffered terribly with children, hostages, right? They're feeling what they're feeling. And it's not for us sitting here in Irvine, California to tell them, hey, right? But the truth is that anger is counterproductive. It's causing harm to oneself. And there are many people. I just read, I think yesterday or this morning, I read about 2 people who have joined the IDF. Right? A mother of a son who was killed in Gaza, taken hostage and killed. Right? But he was serving the IDF at the time. So she is a woman in her late 40s. So she felt that the way to channel all that she's feeling is by joining the IDF, right? Obviously not, 40 plus year old woman is not going to be in a combat situation, but to go through training and to be there as part of the IDF to help to deal with families, to help families when they're going through. There are those units of the IDF who need to be the ones to break the news to families and to sit with the families afterwards. So that's a very, very healthy, productive way of taking the feelings that one has, and instead of it going into a self-destructive, corrosive anger, either self-destructive or destructive to others, anger mode, but saying, how can I channel this in
How can I take revenge?
No.
You're too much of a Russian, Alan. I'm sorry?
There is not a drop of Russian blood.
Okay.
You have to take revenge on these monsters. Why do you have to be so nice and sweet?
They're bombing them, they're not.
Yeah.
And one must say curse. What do you say about the curse? Does it work? Is there such a thing as curse? I curse that monster.
Everyone stay on her good side, okay?
Yeah.
Stay on her good side, right? Okay. There is a concept of a klala, of a curse. The Gemara actually says a kilat. Well, say a bracha of a hedyot, right? There is such a thing of a klala, of a cursing, yes, of putting, trying to heap negative energy towards a person, right? But that's not something that we should be focused on. Right? We'd rather be more of a person who directs bracha than blessing.
We're so sweet that
I know.
all the evil happened to us.
I'm too much of a nice American. What can I say? Yeah. Yes, Dov, and then we want to go a little further. Or maybe we don't.
Anger you two people saying I have to take revenge. And that's the big problem.
Correct. Anger leads to revenge, and we're not allowed to take revenge.
Because it's not always the same.
Only God can. Only God, and with God, it's not revenge. It's not punishment. It's yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so you touched on something earlier, and so did you. There are a lot of really good psychiatrists and psychologists who write. Sometimes it's pop psychology, sometimes it's deeper, sometimes it's Jewish, which tends to be more satisfying and more accurate. But whatever works for somebody works for somebody. So this isn't meant to diss that. Generally, people who are addicted to power because they don't have it in some area of their lives use anger as a kind of fuel. Ooh, I need to get that back. That she didn't have the right to take that. That should have been mine, or it should have been ours, or whatever it is. And it becomes an idol because of the limbic rush. All of a sudden, you're mistaking it for endorphin release or serotonin or whatever. Oh, it feels. well, I deserve to have that. I'm going to get it. I don't care if they don't like it. It's my right, and it becomes something that's a sickness. And
Yeah.
so anger, whether
can.
it's child abuse, whether it is crossing boundaries that need to be intact, whatever it is, anger destroys. Anger doesn't build. So what I'm trying to say is, I think the admonition to not get angry is not that you don't have the right. If somebody hurts your child, guess what your reaction is? It's anger. But you're not going to stay in that. That's
Okay.
it's not
Yeah.
something that you remain in.
Yeah, fair. Oh, ideally, correct. Right. There's certain things where you might get flooded, right? But you don't want to stay, and you don't want to act. You don't want to act on that. David, and then Cheryl.
I've heard it said that you can let crows fly overhead, but you don't have them nest in your hair.
Okay.
You know,
Protect yourself.
yeah.
Okay.
But you also don't need to let them nest in your hair. You don't need to take it in and become part of
Okay.
you.
Yeah.
In 20 years of practice of law, I've had several clients, some of whom come in and say, I'll never forgive so-and-so. And invariably, those same people have cancer.
Wow.
Anger and lack of forgiveness eats away at the person. Like you said, it doesn't harm the object of their anger or their
Right.
revenge.
But
It
it
hurts
eats you
them.
up. It eats you up.
It
Yeah.
eats you up, and physically it eats you up.
It can. Yes. It can. And yes, certainly our state of mind, if it's a constant state of mind, will have its effect on our physical being and physical well-being. Cheryl.
Taking what Allah said a little further in a different direction is about these people who hate us. And it's turning into a pandemic worldwide. And they hate us. They want to get rid of us.
Okay.
So what do we do about that?
Not allow them to get rid of us.
That's right.
Fight back, and try our best in whatever way we can to I don't know, to educate or to look. One of the things I say very often is that since October 7th, I need to I need some protection from the sun. I don't have natural protection up over here like some others are blessed with. Right. So when I'm outside, I typically wear a hat. But when I go into stores, I make sure to not be wearing a hat, but to wearing my kippah. I take my hat off and my kippah, and let people know that we are here, and we are here proudly. We are part of the society, part of the fabric of society. And if I'm going to leave, it's because I'm going to choose to leave, not because anyone else is pressuring me. At the same time, I feel the responsibility of wearing my kippah to make sure that I'm very kind and nice and have a nice smile on my face, and I nod hello to whoever I pass by in the store, and I make some banter, small talk as I'm checking out with the people online or the people checking me out. So we each need to try to do our best to be to be what I call a very positive ambassador of the Jewish people.
And
That's
I
what
think
that's
that-
what we need to try to do.
I just think that this is a machloket that we just cannot understand at all.
Machloket means machloket means a dispute or a fight.
Hatred.
Yeah.
We just can't
Yeah.
there's nothing to understand about it.
I agree with that, and there are many sources that, and we see that this is actually what has happened, that anti-Semitism is something that helps wake us up and keep us unified and keep us together, and to identify there. I said this many times in my travel in airports, and I see a lot more people who are openly self-identifying as Jewish. That in the past I wouldn't necessarily seen them wearing a not that I know this person, that person, but it seems people who in the past would not necessarily have been wearing. They got the hostage thing. They've got these pins. They've got their necklace. They have their Jewish star. And I think all of this hate is making us realize that we stick together, or we're not going to be.
My 8-year-old grandson,
I'm sorry?
Rafael, when they were in Israel, he wanted a Magen David necklace, and he's been wearing it every day to school, to Vista Verde. It's a public school. So the parents were very worried at first, but they didn't want to say anything. Okay, let it sit. And it's been wonderful. Nobody, the kids in his class are, ignorant. They're still really young. But even older kids, they look at it and they don't say anything.
Yeah.
Which is good. I mean,
Yeah.
Nobody bullies him.
Yeah.
Well, it changes when they get into school.
It can.
Probably.
Yes,
But
it does.
all the way.
But the antidote is not to cower and to hide. It is to stand up.
Show those boundaries that you're talking about.
Yeah, to be proud.
This is a boundary, and you're not going to cross it.
Correct.
Exactly.
Correct. Okay, so we covered all two
I guess it's gonna
two
be
of our sources.
I guess it's going to be a 6 session. Rabbi.
We'll see what it is. But we'll continue next week on Thursday.
Hell.
Yes.
So we'll all be back in hell.
Is there any difference between Azazel and Gehinnom?
That's a very good question.
Azazel, we don't. Gehinnom is more of a place. Azazel is more of a term that's used for the Yetzer Hara, for the Satan, and actually, that's two words broken down. Az, which means strength. Azal, its strength will go. Its strength will leave. It's not a lasting strength. Yeah.
There's a difference between hate and anger, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Certainly a difference between hate and anger. Right? I could have hate without being angry. I can be angry without having hate. Right? Anger is more of an emotion. Hate is more of a decision that we make against someone based on their behavior, whatever it might be. Yeah. Okay, my friends. Good schmoozing with everybody over here. Good learning over here. It's interesting viewpoints. Yes, Allah.
What's the name of that writer?
Oh, Edith
Eger.
Eger.
E-G-E-R. Edith is her first name, E-D-I-T-H.
Yeah.
Last name Eger, E-G-E-R.
Yeah.
Eger.
And the book is the choice.
The first book is The Choice. The second book is The Gift.
Yeah.
The Choice is her autobiography, essentially. The Choice is essentially her autobiography, but it's much more than that.
Yeah.
It's a very, very great book. And then The Gift is more of a direct, her advice on your own psychology in the book.
Oh, speaking of being an ambassador, on Sandberg today, I saw this amazing flag that starts to be first the Stars and Stripes, and then corresponds and flows into the Israeli flag, and it's all together, and it's amazing. So it's perfect for 4th of July Shabbat.
Nice.
And also
Nice.
the current activities of the two countries.
Right.
And it's available.
Right. Though if it's an American flag turning into an Israeli flag, I'm sure some anti-Semites will say, they're trying to take over.
See, they told
I actually knocked on her door because I was so taken. And I said, where did you get that amazing? And she actually answered. And she said, where did you get that amazing flag? And she said, I've had 5 or 6 really positive responses like you, but there's been 3 times of vandalism where they tried to take down, and they even did carabiners, and then those were tampered with. So it's been both.
Yep. Okay.
Get that on that.